And allow me at this point, before we took the break, I'd already introduced the panel that we have, but allow me now to also bring in Kimathi Kimenchu, who is a lawyer. Good morning and thank you for joining us. And I know you are listening to the debate, and let me start from you on possibly your comments so far on how we can get rid of this corruption endemic that we seem to have in this country.
Right. Thanks, Mike, and I'm glad to be here with the fellow panelists. I think important to note is I'm being brought in perhaps to look at the legal perspective. When you look at the legal instruments that we have as a country, we have a fairly wide array of instruments that cover the whole area of integrity and ethics. You have Public Officer Ethics Act, you have the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Act, you even have regional instruments like the AU Protocol on Corruption and the UN Protocol on Corruption, all of those which apply within the Kenyan context. I think as far as law goes, one would not be able to point legislative gaps. In other words, just looking at the law, you wouldn't be able to say that the law allows 1, 2, 3 things that need to be covered by way of amendment and that kind of thing. I think in terms of the legislative initiatives that have been taken, there is quite a bit. And it's not just in terms of punishing.
Okay. Sorry, I'll cut you short a little bit. I understand we have a problem with the microphone. We're not able to get you very clearly. So let me come to Senator Moses Kajwang while we sort that out. And of course, Senator, given what Vincent said earlier, and that is in regards to, and what he has also mentioned, we are not lacking laws. It's not legislature that's not there. But it looks like this is a bigger problem than just the laws.
Yeah, Mike, we've got an entire chapter in the Constitution dedicated to these issues, Chapter 6, which we trashed prior to the last general elections. In terms of statutes and regulations, there are many. But allow me just to touch on this thing about the media. Mm-hmm. This false accusation that it is the media that is creating imaginary scandals. And it saddens me when I see CS Musheru, someone who is supposed to have a very progressive and liberal view, being the one being used now to push the media, to silence the media, to intimidate the media, saying that media is defaming the government. You recall almost exactly this day last year, November 2015, John Girashu, a reporter, a parliamentary reporter with the Nation Media Group, was arrested on the orders of Nkaiseri. Why? Because Girashu wrote a report saying that the Ministry of Interior spent close to 3 billion shillings in one single day prior to the last general election. We are seeing that pattern of intimidation of the media continuing. Today, we've got a situation where the CS is intimidating media houses and trying to muzzle them to avoid talking about issues of corruption. What is wrong with the media highlighting a report that has been commissioned by the government itself? So I think, Irungu Kangata, when you go to eat Mutura in the evening at State House, advise the president to leave the media out of this, because the media is just reflecting the
merely reporting what's happening.
Just reporting what is happening. Then there is this thing about Eurobond not being a scandal. Mike, there are two things that we have asked for as an opposition on this Eurobond matter. This Eurobond, there's a perception that the amounts involved are too large to be stolen. In, I think it is in Malaysia. Is it Malaysia or Singapore? Must be Malaysia, where there was one MDB bank and public officer number 1. Those guys stole more than $1 billion out of a bond that was floated. It is in Mozambique, I believe it is Mozambique, or one African country. They floated a Eurobond. A huge chunk of it was stolen. We are asking for two things. Could you tell us the projects that were undertaken by the 275 billion Kenya shillings that was borrowed? And two, could you allow the Auditor General to follow the trail of this money so that we are sure that when money went to the Federal Reserve Bank, it came to Kenya and it didn't go into some funny accounts in Qatar? What does the president do? He calls the Auditor General to State House and gives him a tongue lashing, ridicules him. And these are the same institutions that Irungu says have been facilitated and have been given space. The Auditor General is being victimized, and sometimes I think it is because of his ethnic extraction. He's being seen as a mole, he's being seen as a sympathizer of the opposition. We must allow people like the Auditor General to do their work so that Kenyans can know that we borrowed 275 billion. Divide that by 45 million Kenyans. It comes to 6,000 Kenya shillings per Kenyan, including the child who is in a cradle right now. If this was a chama, Mike, and many Kenyans are members of chamas, and then the chama took a loan. And then you can't account for how the money is used. Chances are you'll find the head of the chama chairman somewhere in Syokimau or somewhere in Ngong Forest. Why is it that when it comes to tax money, we do not get outraged? Irungu was talking about the opposition and its sympathizers. Irungu, let me tell you, our sympathizers are the millions of Kenyans who pay taxes, and they see these taxes being squandered, being used, being grabbed by one person, you know, going to withdraw 100 million shillings, one person, when so many Kenyans are sleeping hungry. Our sympathizers are the many Kenyans who have done jobs with government, but they've not been paid for the last 1 year. In this mafia scandal, which Irungu says is not a scandal, how do you explain that an LPO is issued today, an invoice is also provided on the same day, and payment is done on the same day? Yet I've got hundreds of youth and women and persons living with disability who have done jobs with government. They've not been paid since January. So how special do you become? Okay. Maybe it's because you're a relative of the president. And that is why I keep saying we shall draw this thing into culture. We'll bring a religious dimension, a philosophical dimension. For me, it is leadership. Fish rots from the head. And the head of this fish is Uhuru Kenyatta.
Kimathi, is fish rotting from the head in this case? Do we have a cultural issue? Do we have maybe value? Our value system has changed. You mentioned earlier, and it is true, we seem to place those who possibly we don't know how they get their funds as heroes. Yeah. Could that be a cultural issue that we have, value system?
Yeah, I think actually Kimosop was the one who talked about celebrating wealth notwithstanding its sources. I think when we're dealing with the issue of integrity, and this is quasi-legal, so to speak, I think we're dealing at it at three levels. A, we're talking about integrity leadership, and this I believe is what Mheshimiwa is talking about, is the person who is at the front doing the necessary. Indeed, we have two examples where we're looking at leaders who have taken a firm stance against certain ills within their society and are actually making progress. I'm referring to the president of the Philippines, you know, Duterte, who has been attacking the drug lords, and down south here, the Tanzanian president, Mheshimiwa JPM, John Pombe Magufuli. So that's one, that there is that integrity in leadership. You need to have that if you're really going to talk about integrity in society. Second thing you require is institutional integrity, where one is able to guarantee that process will be followed, and one can actually see that from point A to point B, if we put a predictable input, we know we have a predictable output at the end of the day. If we know somebody has done something wrong, we know that the output will be either they are barred from public office, they suffer penal consequences, and that kind of thing. A friend was actually recently posting on Facebook about how he and his wife went to a foreign country. They didn't know that chewing gum in a public vehicle is not proper, so they were fined the equivalent of 10,000 shillings. Now that is predictable input and output. You know, if you're found doing this, then that's what happens. So there needs to be that, and to build, whereas integrity in leadership is one that you can actually quickly achieve once you have a political leader who is able to do that. Institutional integrity requires time and the necessary support as far as it goes. Then the third area of integrity would be essentially individual integrity. And this is now what Vincent was talking about, the whole area of the cultural problem that we have amongst individuals in this country, where we do not question sources of funds. People have been asking, for example, within the churches, would it be possible for churches to say, we will not, in the next 1 year, because we know politicians will want to bring money, we will not receive money at all. We will not call special harambes, we will not do that. We are running a project, say, not even necessarily a church, a community project. We will not receive money from politicians because we do not know the source and that kind of thing. Are we able to do that? Do we have the knack to do that? Now, all these things must work together. We can't undervalue any of them. So, for example, we can't essentially throw in the towel and say we're a bad society, therefore wherever we pick up people from, it will end up being bad, so let's give up. That's a wrong perspective. I think it's lazy in terms of leadership to draw to such conclusions. I think there ought to be other things. Similarly, we can't say institutions will not work. Let's forget the courts. The courts are freeing people all and all. No, we must be able to challenge. And indeed, you'll find in some of the instances, like in the courts, I do know that there is one judge actually who went through the process of JSC having been found to have been compromised in certain instances, and the JSC actually found that yes, he wasn't fit to continue holding that position as judge. Then again, of course, we must also focus on the culture, starting from the children. How do we motivate our children? Is it a gift kind of society? Do we say, do your homework, I'll give you a sweet? Because that begins the ideas of corruption, the idea that something for something else. As always, we start that trade. There was a book by the late Peter Okondo where he wrote about that if you start that at the beginning, then be not surprised when this person is given 50 shillings, 100 shillings during a political...
For service which you expect.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, Irungu Kangata, what are some of the things that the government is promising to do between now and then, just to make sure that some of this cause and effect, in other words, it's predictable that if you are caught under dubious circumstances, it's predictable what the result will be? Because right now it's not.
First and foremost, in my own opinion, what the government is planning to do, or what it should do, is one, to strengthen the oversight institutions which exist. Number one, the Parliament. We have seen the National Assembly playing a very good role in terms of exposing and following through scandals. We are seeing how Parliamentary Accounts Committee is grilling people behind the NYS saga. And the members of that committee, notwithstanding be from Jubilee, we shall take a strong opposition against corruption. Number two is also to support the media. We have no problem. We cannot sue anyone for exposing corruption. However, just like we do bad things as people in government, the same also occurs to media. When a person does something wrong, you assassinate character. Surely, you should also face consequences. Because these are people with careers, these are people with families, and therefore, when you are making an allegation, get evidence. And if you don't get evidence, don't publish a story. And if you do, surely face the consequences. And that is the rationale behind the move by the ICT minister. Because I can tell you, in that scandal of health, 4 issues were raised, and I would like to take this opportunity to explain to Kenyans. 4 issues. Issue number 1 was Parliament right in appropriating money to the Ministry of Health through a supplementary budget? That's not corruption. That's an issue that should be addressed by Parliament. The second issue was there was double purchase of some food supplements. Again, that other purchase was by Global Fund Health. It was not by the ministry. The third issue that was raised is the issue that there were no containers, the so-called mobile clinics that were purchased. Everyone has seen those things were purchased. As to whether that amount that was purchased is the right one or not, I agree, that's a debate. But that is not contained in that report. The fourth issue was what we call intervote borrowing. Some money were moved from this vote, they were taken to vote to pay suppliers. Again, that happens every day in government, where you borrow vote money from this vote, you take it to this other vote. As to whether probably we could have said this money was meant for a very crucial need, probably we need not to borrow it, that's another discussion for another day. But surely, don't do bad things. The other issue, probably to finalize my argument, is the leadership that has been provided by President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy. Notwithstanding anything that you may have against the two, in my own opinion, they are leading the fight from the front. They have made the correct pronouncement. They have taken action against their very close allies. Waigoro was quite a powerful cabinet minister. She's at home. The PS Mangiti is presently in court.
Through action of the president or the deputy president, she resigned, and that was because she said it was because of ill health. So
well, the point is, I can tell you as a matter of fact, that she was just giving an excuse. I can tell you
that we cannot really verify here.
Fine.
Fact, and you've told us as media we need to do factual, and the fact that we know is that she resigned because of health issues.
Thank you. I love it. What about PS Mangiti? What about Kafura? They are facing court action, isn't it? What about Ngilu? She steps aside, didn't she? What about Chichir? He stepped aside, and he has never come back to the government. What about Engineer Kamau? He's facing a matter before the court of law. So the point is, I think the government should still continue with that action of taking drastic action against people who have been adversely mentioned in corruption.
Okay.
And probably finally, maybe we need probably to relook at our statutes. If there is anywhere we can refix or fix something, maybe the government chief legal advisor should tell us as parliamentarians so that we enhance laws against corruption.
All right. Let me come to you, Vincent,
yes.
And maybe this is, as I can see time is fast spent. We are very quick to condemn and to highlight the negative, yet we're not as quick to maybe look at the positive and reward, as it were.
Yeah.
I know maybe it'll touch on what you was mentioning when your child does well. Sometimes you gift them, but maybe other initiatives that we can look at where those officers who have been above board, those who have done their job well, they can be recognized in one way or the other, so that we also give positive affirmation to those who possibly are doing a good job, because we do have officers who are doing a good job.
I am the secretary of the Kenya Christian Professionals Forum, and I also serve in the governance committee. And what we looked at the fight against corruption in our country in the past, and we said that there are people who are doing prosecution, the oversight Kangata is talking about. But we noticed that there was not much emphasis in celebrating people who are doing the right thing. So we came up with an initiative called the Utumishi Bora Award, which every year we celebrate people who have stood for integrity, who have provided leadership, who have contributed knowledge, because also we need knowledge to inform our interventions, and then finally demonstrated, mentored many in ways of uprightness. So the award ceremony takes place tomorrow at 6, from 6:30.
And what exactly are you awarding?
We are awarding 60 things. Number one, people who have done exceptional work in advocacy and contributed towards a just and a fair society. We also are awarding people who have done good research and contributed knowledge in informing interventions that shapes and bettering our society. We also are awarding somebody who has mentored many in living and doing the right thing in society. And then number four is somebody who's provided leadership, got into an institution and actually brought and bettered situations. And finally, people of integrity, done the right thing for the right reasons, the right way in all circumstances. Then if somebody has demonstrated this in all the other areas, that becomes them to Mishibora.
And what you're saying is that there are people who are basically living above board.
Yes.
Senator Moses Kajwang, do you think that would be a way to go? Because we have, like I said, we're very quick to condemn, to bring to light the negative. Are there ways that we can also affirm the positive so that we have a balance?
I do agree, absolutely. Despite the gloom, there are hundreds, millions of good Kenyans out there. You saw the vetting of the police force, and I was with Kabuludi just last week, just talking about it. Yes, there are rotten eggs in the police force, constables with millions in their accounts. But still, there are those who have been upright, there are those who have been good, there are those who have resisted the temptation to be corrupt. In fact, Kimosop, I would also like to encourage you that expand that even to the police force, because no one ever celebrates our policemen. They're only celebrated when they shoot down a gangster or when they undertake an operation somewhere in Kapedo. I have not seen an institutional arrangement that recognizes our law enforcers on the basis of integrity, on the basis of incorruptibility.
Can I respond
so we
to that?
need to continue affirming them. We need to we need to continue recognizing the teachers who have defied the temptation or the pressure to steal exams for their students. We need to celebrate this many civil servants who are trying to do a good job, a fair and objective job. Even in the counties, they are good people. Unfortunately, you know, it's like ink that goes into a glass of water. It discolors everything. So as long as we get these rotten apples doing the grand corruption, it paints a very negative picture on everybody else. But there are good men and women in this country, and the war on corruption can be won because there are enough forces, there are enough foot soldiers who are willing to be enlisted in this. The only challenge is, who is the general who is going to lead the war? And does the general believe that the war can be won? There is a correlation between these. Compare our Kenyan forces in Somalia. Assuming the president one day called a security summit in State House and said and declared to the world that he has done everything as commander-in-chief, Al-Shabaab are not ending, Kenyans are still being killed in El Ade and in Somalia, and so he has now left it to other agencies to ensure that Kenyans are safe. That would be a disaster. When it comes to war, you never tell your foot soldiers that we have tried everything, now we are desperate. That is the same approach we must look at corruption. The general, the commander-in-chief, should never give a signal that is failing.
Or failing. All right, so you wanted to respond
yes,
to that.
I wanted to say that there are initiatives that are actually celebrating policemen done by Transparency International in partnership with, I think, the Kenya Human Rights Commission. What we don't have is that enough publicity around these events. I remember chairing one of the sessions when I was working in Transparency, and I can tell you, if you look at what policemen are doing, there are police stations that they even use their own personal resources because of little parliamentary allocation to even dig pit latrines. Their own money. You go to a police station, there are no sanitary facilities, and you know when you arrest male and female, you can imagine the needs that happens. You have an OCS who goes out of their way, purchases some of those things. So I think for me, Honorable, if we truly are committed to the fight against corruption, one, is that let us not have a politicized approach, because when we see it becomes this group against this group, what about many of us who are the center, who are neither this, we want to contribute to this. So yes, we need a commander, but it requires a bipartisan approach. What I would actually expect Senator Kajwang out of this is that nothing stops you and Kangata from forming a bipartisan parliamentary committee or caucus to advance the fight against corruption. You did it, and we had electoral reforms the other day. So, because when you talk about the National Assembly, the Senate, they are not platforms for one group or the other. They are platforms for advancing the good in
National
the public.
issues.
So, as the same to the media, nothing stops from the media saying, excuse me, beyond reporting the headlines and getting the patches, well, how can we work together towards advancing this thing? Nothing stops political parties from saying, we will make the fight against corruption an agenda for the next election. So if we can elevate this conversation to the next level, then this country goes up. Because when Kenya moves up, what is going to happen? Everybody is going to go up. If this country burns down, what happens? Everybody goes. So that for me would be my recommendation, even coming from just this conversation, so that it's not just a talk shop, it is a place whereby ideas are refined into actionable interventions that better our country.
All right, because of time, Irumbo Kangata, let me get your closing comments, and I'll get very brief comments from all of you as we close on the way forward.
One, we should not politicize the fight against corruption. Of course, I understand as a person who is in opposition, you must do anything to score a point. That is okay, and I think that's why we have an opposition. However, we should also be factual, so that you don't gloss over the truth with a view of scoring points. Because I strongly believe Uhuru has done a very good job. He's the best president in terms of tackling corruption, but I think opposition has been more smarter in terms of painting us in the negative. I think no one is celebrating the good things we are doing to fight corruption. No one. There is just every time, every day. It's like a scheme to paint the government in the bad light, particularly as we approach the election. So on that score, we be objective. We don't swallow the code bait.
Okay. Senator.
I think Jubilee, its greatest legacy, corruption and impunity, that remains a fact. And this idea, do not politicize corruption. When corruption is perpetrated by politicians, we then must deal with it from that angle. And I mean, I'm a politician, so I will take a political angle to this. My brother here is a lawyer and a man of the cloth, free time. So he'll take a different approach. But some of the most corrupt individuals in this country are politicians. And you know the tragedy? There have only been 3,000 MPs in this country since independence. And when you hear people talking about members of parliament and being the cause of corruption, you realize that there could be some 3,000, 4,000 people. And the number of people who have been ministers in this country is less than 1,000. The political class is a tiny elite. It is bleeding this country to death. And so sometimes we must also look for political solutions to deal with corruption.
All right. Closing comments?
Mike, thanks so much for this. I think for me, my closing comments is, where are our examples? And I say this in light of the fact that when we have been talking about the East Africa community, one of the things that happens is Kenya is always saying we are better than everyone else, which I think is a very mediocre score, because if you're saying I'm top from number 150 to number 154, that really does not create any aspiration. I think we need to have the right aspirations, so to speak, as a country. Where do we want to be in terms of integrity? We cannot settle at the level of we are better than A, B, C. We are better than this past regime and that kind of thing. But at the same time, I wholly associate myself with some of the comments that Kimosop made, that for us to achieve this, then there must be a consensus in the nation that we have to deal with this. I think each person has a responsibility responsibility, and we will be measured as against the responsibility. The president has a responsibility, have no doubt about that, by virtue of the fact that he's supposed to uphold and promote national values. We individually have responsibilities, institutions have responsibilities, but the question is, have we lost hope? 8 years ago, Obama was the candidate of hope, the hope candidate, and now America are mourning that now there is no hope candidate. We're having to choose between the lesser of two evils, so to speak. Let us not lose hope. Let us ask, where are our aspirations? Maybe not even for ourselves. Maybe let's try and be more noble. Boniface Mwangi has been trying to tell us, let us think about our children, for example. Let's say, fine, we can't agree amongst ourselves. What do we agree generally is good for our children? Do we agree that it is good that none of us take more than what we are supposed to have? Do we agree that it is right for institutions to be allowed to function? Do we agree that it is right for the truth to be, so to speak, cradled so that it is properly seen, as so to speak? So I think these are some of the things that we need to look at. So I think we need to start at the point of what is our objective for this nation.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Because of time, we have to wind up right there. And that is Irungu Kangata, the Member of Parliament for Kiharo. Thank you very much. Senator Moses Kajwang, Senator for Homa Bay. We also have Kimathi Kimenchu, who is a lawyer. Thank you for joining us. Also a member of KCPF. And we also have Vincent Kimosop, who's a governance expert, also a member of KCPF. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for that's the state of the nation. And because of time, that's where we'll have to wind it up. But do stay with us right here on KTN News. We've got some news updates coming up on KTN Home. Today is Inspirational Thursday, and it entails to motivate. There is book reviews, restaurant of the week. We've got innovate and make money. That's on KTN News. So for those of us on KTN Home, we'll say goodbye. Those of us on KTN News updates coming up later on. We've got Tech Central.